everybody in the Find Your Joy class. My name is Heidi, and I was going to put all of this into a post, and when I thought about it, it would probably be like 8 paragraphs long, and I thought it might be easier and faster to just make a video. So admins, if this is not allowed, please dismiss it, and no harm, no foul. But I just thought I'd kind of run through, I have not done lesson 4 yet, and I thought I'd run through and kind of cover sort of like thought process types of things and the general direction of the way things go. I see there's a lot of confusion among some of the people in class who are new to this or a little bit intimidated, and I totally get that, and please, I am not trying to step on anybody's toes, but I thought I'd just sort of like one person's perspective. And kind of jump on Team Louise and say there is a method to her madness. There's a reason she's making you guys do these things, and it's all about the artistic process and iteration and discovering things as you go along. So you guys might have seen this in the post. This was my first lesson. She said to use 3 colors, including black and white, and I chose phthalo blue, which is kind of a deep greenish blue, Prussian blue, which is like a grayish dark blue, and fluorescent pink. And I begrudgingly threw black and white in there because I normally don't use black and white that much. But I thought, you know, I'm just going to jump in and see what happens. So I just started adding paint to the paper. I did not gesso this paper ahead of time, and it worked out fine. But I just kind of like went and I just kept covering and covering and covering and covering. And every time I fell in love with a brush stroke and I didn't want to cover it up, I just kept going. I got into this sort of like, you know, this flow state where things are just sort of like happening. And I just sort of like went with these arm motions. I wanted to make sure that I treated it as one piece, even though it was divided. So I covered everything as if I was working on one big canvas. And you know, I've never made anything like this before. My work tends to be really deliberate and have hard edges and lines and things like that. And this was really, really sort of freeing for me. So, and then while I was working on that, I had this sketch in my sketchbook of something that I wanted to try. I've had these 2 canvases prepped for a while now, and I just wasn't sure what to put on them. And so I wanted to try this diptych. This is just the first layer of it, but it came from this. So just to give you an idea of why, you know, to just sort of let yourself go and be free and not think about the end process, but just think about it in the moment. Let the paint slide around, let your hand move around, make whatever marks or designs or patterns or whatever you feel like doing. Don't sit there and think to yourself, okay, how can I make this look pretty? Just blank that out and just watch the paint flow from your brush to the paper. That's it. And then when when you're in that state of just sort of like adventure and observation, you're like a little kid, like in a new place for the first time, and they're just sort of like looking around. They're not making any judgments or anything. They're just in wonder of what's around them. And that's the state that this kind of practice puts you in. So that then when you look at 2 blank canvases that you've had prepared for, you know, a year, you can then go, hey, I think I just want to slap some color on here and just, you know, go for it. And that's what I did there. So I'm still going to work on that. I'm not really sure where it's going to go. It's a lot different than I imagined it in my head, but we'll see where it goes. So then the second lesson was do 2 pieces of the style that you would normally do. And the first piece is use tools, colors, and materials that you wouldn't normally use and see where it goes. And then during that process of working with things that you're not used to, that you don't have a muscle memory with, and there's no comfort zone. This is just like this. This is a new exploration, right? So in this process of, you know, just playing with new and different things and not making any judgments about it, you find out what about this did you like, and take it with you to the next piece, which is something that you would normally do with materials and colors that you would normally make, but bringing along what you learned from this experimental piece, right? Okay. So this is a diptych. It was meant to be just like this, one image across two different substrates, okay? And this side of it looked like the partner to this side, okay? Very graphic, outlined, you know, all that kind of thing. I always use paintbrushes, so for this one, I started out with a palette knife. And I tried filling in this like swoopy shape, very curvilinear shape with a palette knife. And I just kept getting all these like globs and bunches, and so then I just was like, screw it, and I just started like smearing the paint up and down because I liked the feeling of the paint moving under the knife. And then I started adding more colors, and the colors I chose for this were green, purple, and black, because purple is probably one of my least used colors. The green I used for this is a sap green, so it's like a desaturated green, and I usually use really bright greens or yellowish greens. And like I said, I hardly ever use black, so I was just like, let's go for it. And I started smearing the paint around. As I added paint and smeared things around, I completely covered up the sketch, the design that I had drawn on here. But as I moved from tool to tool, method to method, I thought, well, how would this look if this design was still there? Like if I pulled that design back out of the paper into all these layers of gunk that I had put on here. And I used a stick that I found in my backyard, and I etched in the shape of the design in all the layers of paint. And that's something that I never do. I usually don't work with super thick paint. I usually don't do like mark making, that type of thing. I usually don't like scratch into the paint, but I can't say that I loved it, but I will say that it's something that I might revisit again just to experiment some more and see what I can pull from it with, you know, the designs and stuff that I'm working with. All right, so that's that one. And this also kind of doubles as my ugly piece, because while everybody was working on the ugly piece, I had moved on and I was still working on my second one of lesson 2. So while I was working on this one, I was listening and watching the live Q&A, the second live Q&A. And as I was painting, I was listening to Louise and all of the comments that were being made. And someone brought up collage. And so as I was in the process of working on this, the idea of collage came into my head. I answered a question for somebody in the chat about collage, and then I started thinking, let's see if this would really look cool with collage. So I decided to collage the negative and positive spaces of the design and see where that came out. Now, this isn't 100% perfect, but I kind of like some of the ideas that are coming out of this work. I would just consider this a practice piece or an experiment or something like that. But I really like kind of the path that I took to get to this. Started with this, and it was just a succession of ideas that came out of actually doing the work. So if you're sitting at home, you haven't done any of the assignments yet, or you did one and you feel kind of like a failure, don't stop, and don't let your discomfort stop you from ever trying it. Because the only way to learn is by making mistakes. And you know, what you think of as a mistake, somebody else might look at and go, wow, that's awesome, how did you do that? And then you can teach them what you did, even though you didn't like it, and in teaching and explaining it to somebody else, you learn yourself. And the more you do it, the more you go through that process and actually take the steps, the more comfortable you get, the more you'll feel comfortable with experimenting and trying new things and being okay with failing. Because this is one of my favorite analogies. I'm an art teacher, and I used to have kids in my class who would like the first week of class, they'd sit down, they'd try drawing something, they'd be like, I suck at this, and they'd crumple it up and they'd throw it in the garbage. And I would get this from all different students, different, projects and things like that. And I would say to them, well, what's something that you are good at? And a lot of them were skateboarders. So I would ask them, how long have you been skateboarding? And they'd say, since I was 6. And I'd be like, all right, well, when you first got on a skateboard, your dad or your uncle or whoever was teaching you how to skateboard, did they put you at the top of a 2-story half pipe and push you off and just see if what you could do? Could you even do a kickflip on the first day? And they'd all, they'd be like, no, And I'd say, how many times did you fall down while you were learning how to skateboard? And, they'd show me all their scars, and, I'd hear all these stories about somebody's broken elbow that clicks, all that kind of stuff. And I say, okay, well, if it took you that long to learn how to skateboard, and you love skateboarding, and it's something that you do every day, what makes you think you should be able to learn to be able to draw something the first time you try drawing it? So think about that. Think about something that you are already proficient at, and think about how long it took you to get to the level that you're at, and think of all the mistakes that you made along the way, and how each one of those mistakes projected you forward, and you learned not to do that thing again. Okay, this didn't work for me, so I'm not going to do that again. What did work for me? And that's the way I'm going. So you keep moving forward. You keep, you fall down, you get back up. It's like they say, if you fall off a horse, you get back on that horse and you start riding again. Otherwise, you'll never ride. So do you want to paint? Do you want to learn how to paint? Do you want to be a painter? It starts with baby steps. It starts with making mistakes. It starts with totally screwing everything up, making a lot of crap, making a lot of garbage, having your family look at you like, what is going on here? But if you really want to do it, you do it. So just stick with it. This has been I didn't mean it for it to be a scolding, but I just kind of wanted to give you guys a little pep talk. So again, I hope it's okay to put this video out here. I don't want to step on any of the find your joy. I don't want to be inserting myself where I'm not welcome. But I just thought it might be good to get the same idea from another student perspective. So, all right, get out there, get your stuff, and go paint.